Mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts. How do we like our martial arts? We like them mixed and influenced.
Yes, the martial arts will be heavily influenced on Saturday. And after the week that has gone on with the Ultimate Fighting Championship, who knew that Las Vegas and UFC headquarters would actually be the location of normalcy in combat sports come tomorrow? Because it's going to be a circus in Manchester, everybody, as we welcome you to the UFC Vegas 81 and the Prime Card preview show. Misfits Boxing putting together what they called their Super Bowl event. And yes, we are going to talk about it, whether you like it or not. I'm sorry, but thank you for joining us. I am Mike Heck, joined by the esteemed panel. First, my bald brethren, the wise wordsmith. It's good to see Mr. Shaheen Al-Shatti once again. What's up, buddy?
Dude, I'm just loving life, riding high. The D-backs, undefeated in the playoffs, baby, was at that game on Wednesday. It was a beautiful scene. You'll love to see it.
Yes, you do. As a Red Sox fan, it was nice. I'm rooting for you. And also joining us, it's always a special treat when a preview show is accompanied by the great New York Rick, greatest theme song in MMA. New York Rick, my friend, great to have you back. How are you?
Thanks, Mike. I agree with you. Greatest theme song in MMA, maybe greatest theme song ever. Happy to be here and ready to talk some fights.
Yes. I'm trying to figure out how I want to start this thing, guys, because, I mean, I figure we should start with the UFC. The UFC has been the promotion of chaos all week, and then the Prime press conference happened yesterday, and they certainly took over that role. But, Shaheen, I think most of the headlines will be on the Prime card, but I do want to start with the UFC because not a lot of people are talking about it. I feel like this entire event has been lost in the shuffle. As a matter of fact, Bobby Green had this incredible win on Saturday, and we didn't even mention it for a second on BTL yesterday because of everything that is happening right now. But the UFC returns to the world's most famous Apex for the go-home show heading into UFC 294. We have a pretty fun featherweight headliner. We have Sodiq Yusuff taking on the man who may have the toughest resume in the history of mixed martial arts in Edson Barboza. No one's talking about this card, Shaheen, so why don't you wax poetically on it and this main event between Sodiq Yusuff and Edson Barboza?
Yeah, even the UFC isn't talking about this card, right? Like, I feel like this card has very much gotten lost in the shuffle of what has been a relatively insane week. The UFC has done more promotion for UFC 294 card that is suddenly very different than it was the last time we were in the space. And also UFC versus USADA has sort of been the fight that the promotion has been pumping up this whole week. It's been a very bizarre week, a lot of big news. And, it doesn't help that this is a pretty lackluster Apex main event, right? Like, we can all just admit that. It's a fine fight. I'm looking forward to it. I've been very much waiting for Sodiq Yusuff to get a jump like this, an opportunity to be able to face some of these top guys at featherweight. He's been doing this for a while. And Edson Barboza is always fun. But yeah, man, I mean, this is what it is, right? It's a fairly lackluster card on a relatively insane week where a lot of stuff is going on. So it feels like even for the promotion, it's fallen through the cracks.
New York, when it comes to these Apex cards, sometimes they're really good, like top to bottom, good main event and a whole bunch of intriguing matchups. Doesn't happen all that often, but sometimes it does. But mostly it's either we get a pretty solid main event and kind of a lackluster undercard, or we get a kind of solid top to bottom offering with a main event that at best is probably a co-main event on most Apex cards, especially like 2 years back. So all in all, this isn't a bad card. Like, there are some intriguing things that I like here, but your thoughts on the UFC's offering tomorrow?
I feel like you summed it up. Like, this isn't a bad card, but that's kind of been what the UFC has been offering us for all these Apex cards at this point. Like, that is the consistent sentence that everybody has to say about these offerings is it's not the absolute worst. And there should be a higher level of quality that the UFC is putting on. There should be more legitimacy across these cards. There should be more stakes. There should be more on the line. There should be bigger names. But at the same time, as I've always kind of advocated for, if the people are voting with their wallets and they're saying I'm plopping down on Saturday night to watch this and paying gladly for my ESPN Plus subscription, then the UFC is not really under any incentive to change that. But yeah, I do feel like this is definitely one of those. It's not the absolute worst card, but it's pretty close. And we shouldn't be saying that every single time that the UFC is at the Apex.
I don't think it's one of the. Oh, go ahead, Shaheen.
No, I was just gonna say, I do love that that's the mantra that has been repeated on this show and so many other shows over this whole entire year. That's the Apex mantra at this point. The hemming and the hawing and the it's not the worst card. Like, you can talk yourself into it. There's a lot of talking yourself into stuff right now in MMA, and maybe that's just what we deserve.
I gotta say, I am at least somewhat invested in every single main card fight. Every single one of them. The main event, probably of all of these, is like the one that I'm least invested in a weird way, and we'll talk more about it. But Viviane Araújo, could she turn it around? Jonathan Martinez, Adrian Yanez is a great fight. Michel Pereira moving up to 185 to fight an absolute animal and Andre Petroski, and then two bantamweight prospects in Christian Rodriguez who missed weight. But Cameron Simon's been real impressive coming up. So like every one of these fights, like I have some sort of interest in. But yeah, it's just that's it. There's no like, oh, this is incredible. It's just, yeah, I'm interested in this for some reason.
Yeah, there was a time that those were the prelims. That those were the interesting fights on the prelims that made you interested in the rest of the card, and then you got to the main card, and now the prelims are just the main card, and it is what it is. But yeah, we've been beaten. Like let's call it what it is. We've been beaten and conditioned to accept this, and we're going to do that and talk about it. But there was a time where this was not the case, and I long for those times.
You know what? Maybe I got some Stockholm syndrome here, because I feel like I dig the vibe that you're putting down, Mike. Because you're right. Like, you look at Cameron Simon. I'm really intrigued in what this guy is going to do in this division. He's undefeated so far in the UFC, undefeated in his MMA career. You go up and down the card, right? The Michel Pereira Petroski fight. Petroski's a really good prospect. Pereira's just batshit insane and just does crazy things, and so that's always just fun to watch. Charez Losardo would have been fun if we had got it, just because of the bizarre aspect to it, but unfortunately we can't get that. And then Adrian Yanez, like we all were so high on Adrian Yanez, and then that one fight happened against Rob Font, and all of a sudden everybody's off the bandwagon, and now it's just that rebuilding of the bandwagon. Like, there are certainly allures for all of this. So you know what? If that's the energy you're bringing, Mike, heck, I'm here for it. I'll pick it up with you.
And let me make a retraction. Adrian Yanez. My apologies. I know that is how he wants to pronounce from now on. So my apologies for mispronouncing it. Yeah, there's a teal day over the N. It's supposed to be Yanez.
Yanez. Okay, I'll have to note that.
Yes, we'll have to remember that. So, Shaheen, New York Rick mentioned stakes or lack thereof for this card, and you have to look at this main event. And I'm curious, can you find anything at stake here outside of wins and losses? Sodiq Yusuff hasn't fought since October of last year. He fought Don Shainis, who is no longer in the UFC, on super short notice, just ran over him in less than a minute. Edson Barboza is coming off of a nasty win over Billy Quarantillo, one of those y'all must have forgot moments. What are these guys fighting for tomorrow?
I mean, there is certainly stakes to some degree for, I think, both men, right? In particular, Sodiq Yusuff. You look at him, he's been a very sort of intriguing guy in this division for a long time. We just haven't seen him for a long time, too. So it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. But you look, I mean, 6-1 in the UFC. The one is Arnold Allen. You can't fault him for that. But it is one of those situations. It feels like if you're that up-and-coming prospect and you're sort of peaking into, your late 20s, early 30s, and sort of you've been around for a while and you've done this, you have a lot of wins, the UFC gives you a couple cracks at this, right? The Arnold Allen was the first bite at the apple for Sodiq Yusuff, and it didn't work out for him. He's going to get another bite at the apple here. Edson Barboza, well-known name, guy we all respect, one of those names that will propel you into these sort of fights that really matter. This is the second one for Sodiq Yusuff. To me, that's stakes, right? Because if the second chance doesn't work out for him, the UFC really doesn't do many other chances after that. Like, maybe if he keeps winning, he'll get one more shot to sort of move upward into this sort of next tier at featherweight, sort of enter that conversation again of the guys who we really talk about in that way, right? The even in terms of up-and-comers, right? The Movsar Evloevs and like whatever, everything going on in this featherweight division. This is that chance for Sodiq Yusuff. So that, to me, I mean, that's some level of stake, because especially for that man, like, he if he does not work out for him, he's going to have a long road back to this. And then Edson Barboza, like, we have been waiting to see how far, I guess, Edson Barboza can really take this whole featherweight thing since it started. It's been mixed results, up and down. He beats the guys we think he might need to beat, and then he loses to the guys who are maybe that next level, right? A Bryce Mitchell, a Giga Chikadze. Looked tremendous against Billy Quarantillo. I mean, that knee was absolutely brutal. Can Edson keep it going? How many of these more does he have left in the tank? Like, that's some level of stake as well. I think this is a fight certainly that matters to some degree. And also, it's just going to be a damn good fight, right? Like, these two guys, you look at the way they approach the game, I think this is going to be fireworks, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
You do make a great point, because New York Rick, there's two guys that are right around the same weight classes that I've just been waiting to see if they can get there. One is Montel Jackson, and he just can't find his way into the octagon. And when he does, usually the guy he's going to fight can't make it. So he just goes out and annihilates them. And then he gets an opportunity and somehow he can't make it. And Sodiq Yusuff is sort of that at featherweight, where it just seems like he's been kind of hanging around the top 15 for a while. He was supposed to fight Giga Chikadze last September. Fight doesn't happen. He gets Don Chanis and wins quickly. And then he's out for a whole year. And we're wondering, all right, where is he? What's he going to do? Where he goes from here. So what are you looking for from Sodiq Yusuff? Big opportunity here against a big name, been out for a while. What are you looking for from Sodiq Yusuff here? Where are your big questions?
Yeah, I think he needs to have a big performance. I think this is the stage has been set, right? Let's call it what it is. Him getting a main event opportunity is out of desperation by the UFC. They're struggling to put on top level fights atop these Apex cards, and they're putting him on the stage, and he needs to deliver. If you look just one weekend ago, if you look back, Grant Dawson was supposed to have a coming out party against Bobby Green. That was supposed to be him ascending to the higher level of that division, and Bobby Green spoiled it. And I think that this is very similar in that regard. Like, this is an opportunity for Sodiq Yusuff to announce himself, to say, I've arrived, and beat Edson Barboza, and then look at these top fights. When you look at the Arnold Allen, Ilia Topuria, Brian Ortega, Yair Rodriguez, the cream of the crop guys. He was booked against Giga. Giga's ahead of him. Bryce Mitchell's ahead of him. So this is where Sodiq Yusuff has an opportunity to crack the seal on that and really advance into the top level. And for Edson Barboza, it's an opportunity, much like Bobby Green had and delivered on, to send him back and say the old guard is still here and it's not going to be that easy. So there's stakes in that regard, but the stakes are you going to get a top 8 fighter, which is fine and decent. But that's as far as it'll go. But I think with the big performance, Sodiq Yusuff can say, now I belong in the upper echelon of this division, and kind of stay there if he's able to be competitive with the top names.
Yeah, and Sadiq's did a great job. Go ahead, Shaheen.
No, I was just going to add to that. I will say, like, I like referencing the Grant Dawson thing, because this is something that, like, we have seen this consistently throughout the year, and even last year too, of UFC sort of using these Apex shows, these filler shows, realistically, right? Because that's what a lot of these are. Just like, hey, we have guys, they have contracts, they need to get these fights, let's just put them on this card. I don't mind in that respect the idea of using these filler shows as sort of soft launches for a lot of these guys, like a Grant Dawson, like a Sodiq Yusuff, where it's, hey, like, if you're going to be on this next tier, how will you handle the spotlight? How will you handle headline events? How will you just handle these harder competitions? Doing that in a lower stakes setting, like a show like we're about to see on, Vegas 81, like a show we're about to see on Saturday. That's so much lower stakes than if Sodiq Yusuff was out here doing this in a co-main event of a pay-per-view or something like that, right? So I almost don't mind the idea of the soft launch into contendership for a lot of these events, whether it's a Grant Dawson or Sodiq Yusuff, just like throwing a little tiny bit of the spotlight, a little tiny bit of the pressure on them that would come once you reach that level, and just being like, okay, like, how do you handle it? Sink or swim type of moment. I actually don't mind that, because we saw it with last week with Grant Dawson. Like, some guys rise to meet the challenge. Some guys maybe can't get to that level on their first attempt. It is an intriguing, just like, play in that respect.
And Sodiq Yusuff has done a tremendous job. He's more over now without fighting than he was when he was active, because of the gambling content that he puts out. And you get to see a different side of his personality. He's freaking hilarious in those videos. And now if he comes in and beats a guy like Edson Barboza, fans are going to be clamoring for big fights. Maybe he gets like a guy like a Calvin Kattar or something like that when Kattar's ready to come back, maybe end of the year, early next year. So yeah, I think Shaheen, you've talked yourself into this card a little bit more, and I'm talking myself into thinking this main event has more stakes than I actually thought they would. So that's very interesting. Look at us just kind of talking our way through stuff. Right now,
I'm not there.
Shaheen. Well, you're correct. You are who you are, and that's what we love about you. Right now, Sodiq Yusuff, Shaheen, is the betting favorite. -166. The comeback on Edson Barboza, +140. Line's been pretty much around here all week long. It is a vast difference from the Bobby Green, Grant Dawson line, where Grant Dawson was like a -340 favorite. Bobby Green was a massive underdog. This one lined a little bit closer. Shaheen, who gets this done? Who gets their hand raised at the end of the card?
It's strange, right? Because it's almost a very similar setup that we just experienced last week. It's right down to the ages, right? Like Edson Barboza is right in that Bobby Green range. Green was 38. Edson's 37. Sodiq Yusuff is similar to that Grant Dawson range. Grant was in his late 20s. Sodiq Yusuff is just turned 30. It's all sort of a mirror match of it. I would say Grant Dawson coming into last week at least was probably a more hyped prospect. I think there was more expectations put on him. But ultimately, I do have to almost, it's weird to say even after we just saw Bobby Green pull the upset off in a matter of seconds to go back to this well. But I just don't know how much Edson Barboza has left for him or in him for these type of opportunities, right? For these type of matchups against these hungry up and comers. I have been high on Sodiq Yusuff for a long time. Like you said, he hasn't been in the cage for a long time. That scares me a little bit. That element of ring rust, that element of just, we have not done this for quite a while at this point. But that being said, I have been high on this man since he came into the UFC off the Contender Series. He's been intriguing to me. I wish we could see more of him, and I wish we would see more high value matchups with him against him. Maybe this is the one that propels him into it. Hopefully it is. But I think he wins. I think it's going to be a really tough fight, though. I don't feel like this is going to be a walkover for anybody. I think this is going to be a real back and forth battle. Ends with maybe a 4th round, 5th round finish, but ultimately I can see it going to a decision. Sodiq Yusuff, and he passes the first major test of what will be eventually, his rise to, I think, contendership within this 145-pound division.
You're correct. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I think Sodiq Yusuff's going to get it done. But as we know with Edson Barboza, you really just need to time one really clean shot and it changes everything. And he's very capable of that. But I ultimately think if we're talking about the volume and the ability to keep that up over 5 rounds and put the pressure on Edson Barboza, I think he has the tools to be able to do it. I think he's also dangerous in the submission capacity. So I think there's just going to be a youth element and an energy element that I think is going to be in his favor, where Edson Barboza is really going to need to have one of those like throwback special performances in order to get it done. I think Yusuff is of the level that he's really going to have to raise his game, Barboza, that is. And you can't, it's hard to kind of like in analysis think about that. It's hard to think like, yeah, if he can land that one shot, the puncher's chance type of opportunity. I think the line is probably where it needs to be, where Yusuff's a little bit of a favorite, but there's still respect and credit to Edson Barboza for how dangerous he can be in flashes and in moments. But I see Yusuff ultimately probably being able to pull it out. But is he in danger at all times? Yes, and that's kind of what makes this matchup so fun and a test for him.
So if you guys listen to the podcast network, I was tagged in for GC on No Bets Barred this week. So I had to play some ponies because I'm not just going to go on there and be like, here's what you should do and then not do anything. I have a bet on Edson Barboza by knockout at +210. I think if he's going to do it, he's going to have to do it within the first 7 minutes of this fight. And then after that, I think Sodiq Yusuff can take over and just kind of pepper away. I don't know if he gets a finish. But the money's on Edson Barboza to get a finish. If not, I think Yusuff wins a pretty comfortable decision. But that's where the shekels are. +210, Edson Barboza by knockout. I know Sodiq Yusuff is a tough, durable dude. Doesn't really get finished all that often. I don't even know if he's ever been finished. Has he been finished? Yes, he got finished in Titan FC back in 2017. So he can be knocked out. It was a big slam, and then he got knocked out with punches on the ground. But if anyone could do it, you know who else is a durable guy who doesn't get finished all that often? Billy Quarantillo. And Edson Barboza did it in pretty quick fashion. He is just an absolute sniper. So that's where the value is for me. But Sodiq Yusuff wins. Would not be surprised about that. 1 iota. 1 iota and what a moment it would be. Let's go low-key banger, Shaheen. We mentioned the main card. I think there's some fascinating things here on this main card. Shaheen, we have 2 women's bantamweight fights on this card, and not like short notice
History in
flyweights
the
coming
making.
up. We have 2 women's bantamweight fights on this card. We have a lot of bantamweight fights total, but we have 2 actual official bantamweight fights on this women's bantamweight fights. Chris Gutierrez is back. He was supposed to fight Montel Jackson last week. It still hurts my soul that I have to say that. Alatang Haley stepping in. What's the low-key banger for you? What's the one that outside of the main event, you're just going to make sure you don't miss?
I mean, Terrence McKinney on the undercard, certainly. I'm still in on the Terrence McKinney train. I know he's had a little bit of a up and down rocky road here in the UFC after that explosive start, but I still enjoy watching that kid fight, and I think he has a cool story, and I'm still high on his potential in this lightweight division. But ultimately, if you're just going outside of the main event, I'm going back to what we talked about at the top, which is Jonathan Martinez versus Adrian Yanez, because, man, I know a lot of people have jumped off the Adrian Yanez bandwagon. I am not there yet. I think this kid has so much potential and so much talent at 135. Like we saw it in a lot of his early fights, the fast hands, the boxing, the counters, just everything was very impressive to me. And it felt like, he even said it himself this week, that it felt like almost he was feeling his oats a little bit too much. He was just feeling himself going into that Rob Font fight, maybe high on his own supply, a little bit, reading a little bit too much of his own headlines. And he kind of felt like it was going to be given to him rather than him having to earn it. And you can't go into a fight against Rob Font like that, right? Mike, you know that better than anybody. You're good friends with that man. Like that dude is a gamer. And if you're not on your game, he's gonna make you pay for it. And that's very much what happened. I'm not out on Adrian Yanez yet. I think he has still a big career, a really nice career ahead of him. And I think this is just the first step in whatever the rebuild, the volume 2, the version 2 version of him will be. And I'm very intrigued to see how he comes out here on Saturday and just whether, he is able to right the ship and reclaim a lot of that momentum that I think he once had. Because, I mean, man, we were all starting to throw him in the bantamweight rankings, right? Like I was certainly starting to put him in that 12, 13 range after that run that he was on in the UFC early. I'm still there with him.
He's still ranked 14. Jonathan Martinez 13. I didn't realize both those guys are in the top 15 right now, but both guys looking to make a big move. And if you go back and watch the Yanez Font fight, it's not like Adrian got, but it's not like he did nothing. It's not like Font just ran him over. Like Adrian was piecing him up a little bit with the jab. Font was a bloody mess a little bit. Font just had a great game plan. I love the move where he just kind of reached behind Adrian's head every time he threw a jab and then just landed like a hockey punch uppercut to him over and over again until it just became too much. So there's no doubt in my mind Adrian learned from that fight. I freaking love this fight with the silence behind the violence, Jonathan Martinez, because Jonathan's won 5 in a row very quietly, pun completely intended there. Beat a Nurmagomedov in his last fight. I mean, that's always good for the resume. So I love that fight too. New York Rick, what's it for you?
Yeah, another vote for that fight. But if I'm having to scratch a little bit deeper, I guess, I think there's some weird, fun potential in Darren Elkins and TJ Brown. I think that's going to be a scrap. And I think ultimately there's going to be some back and forth, some ups and downs and some roller coaster rides as there are in Darren Elkins fights. And quite honestly, like TJ Brown fights as well. So that's probably where I'm looking. But, I'm only saying that because Yanez and Martinez was already mentioned. And that one's the one. That one is the one for sure.
It would have been Chires Lacerda too, but alas, medical issues, non-weight cut related on the Lacerda side. He's definitely in the conversation of one of the worst runs in UFC history. I mean, it's just incredible, man. It's just unbelievable. So that is UFC Vegas 81. Now, Shaheen, depends on how you feel about circuses and utter chaos. Across the pond, we go to Manchester for the Prime card, Misfits Boxing's big Super Bowl event. Yes, we have KSI versus Tommy Fury. That one has just kind of floated through look, John Fury has stolen some headlines, no doubt about that. Those two guys have been getting after it, but all the headlines, as has been the entire build to this week, has been around Dillon Danis and Logan Paul. Things got real testy yesterday after the press conference. There was a microphone hit to the head of Logan Paul. He was escorted off a stage, and Logan drilled him. And you could see in certain videos that Logan started gushing immediately. Logan Paul shows up to the weigh-ins. Dillon Danis said all day long he missed weight. It's a bunch of shenanigans. I'm fighting Jake Paul instead. He's facing off with Mike Perry. There's just so much ridiculousness going on with this fight. And somehow, Shaheen, when the weigh-ins happened, Dillon Danis weighed more than Logan Paul. I don't know how that is physically possible. I don't know how that is possible at all. But Dillon Danis somehow weighed more than Logan Paul. So let's gauge your excitement levels and then maybe your intrigue levels for this Misfits boxing card. Because I said on BTL yesterday, I am weirdly intrigued by it, but I cannot wait till KSI Tommy Fury is over. So then we can never talk about this again. We can move on and look forward to other things. But I'm still pretty like weirdly fascinated by it, but I just want it to be over. Where are you at with this?
I love that you mentioned the weight. I'm guaranteeing you that if Charles Oliveira watching that, he would have loved to have whoever weighed in Logan Paul at his fight here in Arizona against Justin Gaethje, because he definitely wouldn't have come in overweight with that. Like I've seen a lot of weigh-ins. I've seen a lot of dudes at weigh-ins. I would be stunned if Logan Paul is actually 194 pounds. What are we talking about? That man was gigantic. I don't know, man. I mean, what can you say, right? Like, I'm not better than this. I came up in a time when, Pride FC was my first love. I came up at a time in this sport where, circus fights were the norm, where that was just something that I loved and appreciated. I'm always here for a great circus fight. I'm certainly not above it. That's kind of my jam, frankly. So I can't say that I'm not somewhat intrigued by this, just because of the way that they've built it up, the way they've sold it, the production elements, all of this. Like, Misfits knows what they're doing. I don't know that I care too much about this, if I'm being honest. I'm kind of the old head, I guess, just out here watching the car crash and be like, oh, that's something. I don't know that this feels meaningful. It doesn't seem like it has a lot of stakes in the grand scheme of things. But that being said, I mean, plenty of wars have been fought over the course of human history over the simple fact that if you insult my significant other, if you insult my romantic partner, especially if you do it repeatedly and egregiously, like, we're going to have words and we're probably going to throw down. There have been a lot of people over the course of, humanity who have fought and died for those kind of causes. So I can certainly relate some level of the co-main event, double main event, whatever you want to call that. I very much kind of bought in on the idea that, like, hey, I just want to see whether Dillon Danis will be able to get away with this scot-free, or if he's going to get beaten to a pulp because of everything that he's done. The babyface turn for Dillon is frankly one of the most astounding and surprising babyface turns I've ever seen in my life in any sport. Like, this dude was the laughingstock of the internet not too long ago. You look at this time last year, like, who cared about Dillon Danis other than to just sort of make fun of him on the side? And now all of a sudden he's just this mega popular dude who everyone's sort of coming around on. And it's, the whole thing's very strange. I don't know that I care too much about it, but hey, man, more power to them. They're going to make a lot of money.
New York Rick, where are you at here? How into this are you?
I'm all the way in. Like, inject this just directly into my veins. Like, the pageantry, the storylines, the beef, the drama. Like, I think there's an inclination as us in MMA fandom and specifically people who are covering the UFC and watching the UFC as fans week to week, to compare and contrast as if these things are equivalent products. Like, if you do end up tuning into the Misfits card tomorrow, and you are tuning in to see the highest level of combat sports competition, you've failed somewhere. You've taken a misstep, and I can't help you with that. You need to correct whatever has been done there, but that's not the place that you should be looking. The place that you should be looking is most of the time to a UFC pay-per-view, if you're looking for that, or the highest level boxing fights. If you're looking for a fun time, if you're looking for drama, if you're looking for stakes, and if you're looking for what Shaheen alluded to, the idea that, like, this guy insulted my significant other and now I have to get retribution for it. This card has that. And then it's got a bunch of other interesting, flamboyant characters underneath. You sometimes you want a hamburger, sometimes you want steak, and sometimes you just want a sugar rush. And this to me is the sugar rush. This to me is, you're sitting in the movie theater and you're guzzling Coke, you're wolfing down popcorn, and you're eating Twizzlers until you throw up. Like, that's what this is. And it's just as enjoyable. And I'm all in, and I'm going to be sitting there front row ready to throw up after the Twizzlers.
This is the Dairy Queen treat of our weekend.
Yeah. This is Smarties, man. This
it.
is Smarties. You might get it in your Halloween bag and be like, I'll eat the peanut butter cups first. But if there's nothing else in the bag, you're going to eat all those Smarties in like one bite. And that's kind
See,
of what
you
this
have it all
fight
wrong.
is.
I'm eating both at the same time, double fist, gladly, happily. Like, give it to me all. I don't have to eat the Reese's cup first. Give me all of it. I want all of it.
Fair enough. The babyface turn is unbelievable, Shaheen. It really is unbelievable. I don't it's just
It's
incredible.
unbelievable, man.
He's done some pretty heinous stuff. He's like, wow, this guy, unbelievable. When he was in Bellator, and he was like sort of the laid back jiu-jitsu guy that got the hype. Like, he was nowhere. I mean, this is just unbelievable right now. And now he's going to fight Logan Paul, who, by the way, came out in a mask during the weigh-ins to hide the head and keep the mystery alive on whether or not this fight's going to happen. By the way, if you listen to No Bets Barred, I do have a bet at plus 140 that this fight does happen. So I was a little scared. I was a little worried once I saw Logan's head start busting open, but I'm just going to ask you, Shaheen, it's the day before. How confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that this fight actually happens tomorrow?
I mean, it's gonna happen, right? Like, it would be stunning if it doesn't happen at this point. Like, all of whatever kind of weird goodwill that Dillon Danis has built up at this point, somehow magically, again, I'm not quite sure how, but this man has somehow turned it around. All of that goes away if this fight doesn't actually happen. If it's on his side, at least. If it's a Logan Paul side, it's a different thing. But the whole thing is, like, I don't know. Mike Perry's getting involved. He's taking his shirt off with Idris Virgo. Salt Poppy's out here just super skinny now. Like, that man lost like 60 pounds in a matter of like 4 months. I can't even. He looks like a different human being. Like, I don't know. It's gonna happen though. I bet it would be stunning if it doesn't happen. Like, that is irrecoverable for that man's, like, just the way he's perceived if it doesn't happen, right?
Like, I think Dillon's fighting. Like, I think Dillon has to fight. But like, if this is a bad cut on his head, like, how can he fight? I know this is not real in a lot of respects. I'm sure there's no outright commission overseeing all of this, but it still seems kind of weird that he might fight with his head all busted up. So I think Dillon fights anybody at this point. I think he really doesn't have a choice, but are you concerned about Logan Paul, perhaps, New York Rick? Or is he just playing this up perfectly, keeping the mystery alive with the mask?
Yeah, the WWE guy is playing this storyline perfectly. There's no chance that behind the scenes the cut hasn't been addressed and seen by the promoters and by the regulatory bodies that are involved, to the point that they wouldn't be advertising this fight if they knew that come fight night, all of a sudden Logan Paul is going to pull out. I'm extremely confident that he will show. I'm extremely confident that Dillon Danis will show. And if I had to be scared about one or the other, right here, sitting here now on October 13th, Friday the 13th, actually, bizarrely enough, it would be Logan Paul that I'd be more concerned about. And not because of the cut, but because Dillon Danis has undressed him in the promotion of this fight. He has completely dominated him from pillar to post in terms of getting people excited about this card, in terms of winning people over, in terms of showing that he's the more game person in the equation. Who knew that, like, the WWE star would be second billing to Dillon Danis in terms of the promotion, because he's absolutely crushed it. You think of him what you will. Yes, he hasn't fought in a long time, but if I'm the promoter, if I'm Misfits, I owe Dillon Danis a lot for the way that this fight week and even previously has gone off. He's been the driving force behind it. Now, granted, I thought it was pretty funny when Logan Paul brought out Chris Hansen, but that's a very specific reference. And I thought it was pretty funny when he brought out Gordon Ryan, but that's also a very specific reference. They've kind of fallen flat, I would imagine, with the mainstream public, and it seemed like with the crowd. Dillon Danis seems to be the guy that's winning hearts and minds, and he's been acing it. So yeah, if I was worried about anybody, it'd actually be Logan Paul and not Dillon Danis, and that's not even related to the cut situation. But I'm pretty confident that these two will get in the ring, make a decent amount of money, and probably hug it out and probably do the thing that everybody does after they do these fights, where it was all promotion and it was just for show and all that stuff. But that's fine, because until we get there, I'm going to buy in. So yeah, I'm excited about it, and I think we will see it.
The Chris Hansen thing. The Chris Hansen thing was just tremendous, man. And I gotta say, kudos to Dillon, because I guess I wasn't well researched in Chris Hansen, but he immediately hit that man with like, oh, you got tax problems, where's your tax problems, all that stuff. It's like, I didn't even know any of that was real. So
Dillon's been crushing it. Dillon has absolutely been crushing it.
It's been wild, man. It really has been wild. Is there, outside of not fighting Shaheen, is there any way Dillon comes out of this looking really bad? Like, even if Logan just wrecks him, because he's not really a boxer, he's the jiu-jitsu dude. But just the fact that he shows up and gets in the ring and goes through all of this and showed up, like, is that enough? I know there's not a lot of moral victories in MMA, but this is not MMA. This is weird boxing. This is the circus. Is there any way, if Dillon gets in there and actually boxes Logan Paul, that he comes out looking really bad?
Maybe. I mean, I think there's certainly a world where he comes out, looks horrendous, and then Logan sort of carries him to continue looking horrendous, and it's not like a quick knockout, and instead it's like a prolonged, like, look at how bad this guy is at that. That seems like that could be pretty bad for him afterwards, right? Like, that could maybe take some of the shine off this. But other than that, like, I don't know, like, I'm not sure what the odds would be on this, but I'm assuming that Logan is an overwhelming favorite because he is the actual person who has boxed before. He is a much larger man. And, you know, he's someone who hasn't had all of these various surgeries and all of these just injuries that have affected Dillon and assumedly taken away a lot of the explosiveness that maybe he once had as a jiu-jitsu prodigy, right? Like, I don't know. I mean, I think we all expect Logan to go in there and tear this guy apart. It's not a kid at this point. But again, I think there is a world, to answer your question, where he goes out there and he looks really bad over a really long sustained period of time, that could be bad. But other than that, like, yeah, as long as he steps in, does whatever he needs to do, and then gets out of there and actually does the fight and shows people that, like, hey, yeah, no, I actually do fight instead of just sign up for fights. I think that's a win in and of itself for Dillon. I mean, what's his Instagram following now compared to what it was 6 months ago? It's night and day.
It's crazy. New York Rick, what do you think? Is there any way Dillon, like, if Dillon just shows up and fights, gives it the old college try, and at least tries, is it okay? Is that enough?
Boys, like, not so fast. Like, why are we counting out Dillon Danis here? In fact, I don't think this is a foregone conclusion at all. I'll be laying some lumber on Dillon Danis.
What?
Of the two, let's really think about this for a second. Of the two, yes, certainly Logan Paul has boxing fights, but would you consider Logan Paul a boxer in the way that you consider Jake Paul a boxer? I certainly wouldn't, right? Like, I think Jake has taken it very seriously, dedicated him to the sport, and is truly a boxer, right? Like, that is his love. Logan Paul's a guy out there marketing, promoting Prime, doing WWE shows, like, and let's call it what it is. Like, he has not been that great in the boxing ring. I know he thinks he beat Floyd Mayweather, who carried him and allowed him to be in an exhibition fight with him. He's not that great a boxer. And I'm willing to take the chance that Dillon Danis, in his years of combat sports experience, now, yes, he is coming from the jiu-jitsu world, but has trained his hands and is somebody who actually has been in competition and fights for much longer than Logan Paul has, is at least capable enough to be in the fight, to the point where the odds feel out of whack to me. The odds feel completely out of whack. Now, is there a world where Dillon's just not a good enough boxer, where, like, the hands are just not there yet and he really is going to be reliant upon his ground game in MMA? Sure. But I'm not counting Dillon Danis out. And in fact, you'll see your boy backing Dillon Danis financially for sure. So the earlier question regarding, is there like a losing situation for Danis? Perhaps. Like, if he goes out there and gets absolutely flatlined by Logan Paul, that's going to be pretty embarrassing after all the promotion and the build up to this. And I think he's prepared for that outcome, but that's going to be pretty bad. We saw Tyron Woodley get absolutely smoked, Ben Askren get smoked by Jake Paul, and it was hard as MMA fighters to kind of deal with that, and they became memes forever. But truly, and I said this earlier, if you look at this fight, if you look at, can Dillon Danis headline a card and sell a fight, I think he's already proven that right now. I think he's already, like, established himself as somebody that they can rely upon to do this in a high capacity. So I think it's a win for Dillon Danis, just even what has happened so far. I think if, let's say he does lose a boxing decision, does this preclude him from going back to MMA and somebody thinking, I could make some money off Dillon Danis, that he's able to do this and headline a card and promote it? I wouldn't. If I was an MMA promoter, I'd be interested in Dillon Danis. If I was a boxing promoter, if I was Misfits, I'd be interested in bringing back Dillon Danis. So short of the initial embarrassment of getting absolutely starched or flatlined by Logan Paul, I think Dillon Danis has put enough hay in the barn to say, like, I'm box office for at least to this degree, at least in this realm, at least in this world where I have a dance partner, that I think it's all upside for him. If he has even a mediocre showing, I think he's somebody who could kind of make the rounds. And think about like a guy like Anthony Taylor. Anthony Taylor hasn't really like had any like amazing boxing influence or boxing performances, but he's sticking around this world just based on the idea that he's game, just based on the idea that he has a little bit of a fan base from his MMA days, and just based on the fact that he's going to get on the mic and call people out. Dillon Danis is that to the nth degree, right? Dillon Danis is that with a higher profile, with friends like Conor McGregor backing him, where he can just come in and kind of make some ruckus. So I think there's only upside for Dillon Danis, even in the worst case scenario where Logan really does like embarrass him and knock him out. It'll be a momentary blip and it will be tough to recover from socially and online. But even then on the back end, I think Dillon Danis will still be able to do good business. So I think this is all win-win for Dillon Danis at this point.
The betting lines for this fight: Logan Paul, as of right now, from what I'm looking at, minus 500 favorite. Dillon Danis coming back at plus 330. Shaheen, who wins? Who's the pick?
None of us, Mike Heck. None of us win. Logan wins, right? Like, yeah, Logan's gonna win. It's not gonna be great. It's gonna be mediocre boxing from two goobers. Like, I don't know. It is what it is.
Here's a big factor in this fight. 6 rounds is huge, right? Because like you lose one and now all of a sudden you're in a deep hole, but also like it can also go either way in a 6-round fight. There's really like not a lot to do. We saw this in the Anthony Taylor versus Salt Poppy fight, where I believe it was 4 rounds and Anthony Taylor kind of just hugged him for 4 rounds and there's not much to score. And all of a sudden you can end up on the right side of a decision. So I think the limited nature of this fight lends itself to either guy. Like anybody can really win this. And if you're going to give me plus money on the guy who's actually a fighter versus the guy who's a marketer and WWE star, I'm at least going to roll the dice on it. I'm at least going to take a chance. But would it shock me if Logan Paul just like was slightly better at boxing? No, it would not.
I love that you're still a little salty about the Salt Poppy Anthony Taylor.
I hate
it's
it.
Like a little
I hate
bit.
it.
I could hear it coming out.
I hate it. Oh, it's not a little bit. I'm a lot of bit angry at Anthony Taylor for the hugging that happened in that fight. Just box. I want to see boxing, and I think Salt Poppy will deliver. And I'm a little bit tongue in cheek because I do like Anthony Taylor, and I think, as I said, like he's good for this influencer space. He really like brings something good to it. But yeah, come on, let me see Salt Poppy's hands. Like stop hugging him and let me see Salt Poppy's hands, and hopefully we can see that this week.
How dare you?
But you might want to thank Anthony Taylor because he might have brought out Salt Poppy's final form. Like I don't watch Dragon Ball Z.
Fair point.
I don't watch Dragon Ball Z, but whatever the thing is in Dragon Ball Z where people go into the chamber and they stay in there for like a couple months or whatever and power up and then they come out and they're a completely different person. Like that's what Salt Poppy just did. And it's because of Anthony Taylor. So you might want to thank him.
I didn't think about that. It's a completely fair point. We've got the final evolution in the Pokemon chain of Salt Poppy. You know, like he's so handsome now. Like, does he take over the Salt Bay nickname? Does he steal it? Does he become Salt Bay? Does he become Salt Zaddy? Like, who knows what's going to happen with handsome Salt Poppy? And if he can go out there with the hands and get a knockout, like the sky's the limit for our boy. So yeah, you're right. Like maybe we owe Anthony Taylor thank you for unlocking Salt Poppy's ultimate evolution.
I have a bet on this fight. It is a draw at plus 1,400. That's what I bet on.
It's not unreasonable. It is
6
not
rounds?
unreasonable. Yeah,
it's going to be weird, dude. It's going to be weird. It's going to be chaotic. There might even be like a DQ. Like if there's a DQ prop somewhere, I'd probably take that. Like I'd probably, if I could take a fight ends without an actual punch landing, I would probably do it. But I'm gonna play the draw.
They both did grappling in their open workout, so who knows? Maybe they're going in there to just sub the other guy, like Nate Diaz did with the guillotine at the end of the Jake Paul fight, and walk out of there with their hand raised as if they did something. So yeah, who knows? But I think that's not a bad play at all. I'm with you on that.
The other bet I have in this card, I'm betting against our friend Anthony Taylor. King Kenny is just a massive individual, and he's actually a pretty good boxer. I just don't know if Anthony can get near him. And I think he's just going to get jabbed to death for however long that fight lasts. But again, Anthony Taylor is a gamer. He will fight anybody, and respect to him. All right, let's go to the peeps. We have a few minutes. We'll take some questions. I'm sure the peeps are so excited that we just spent time talking about this event.
They're all going to be watching. Give me a break. They're all going to be watching this. Give me a break.
You're going to be paying attention. You all are. You're going to be somewhat intrigued to at least go to MMAfighting.com and see what's going on.
We all slow down on the freeway, and there's a crash on the side of the freeway. We all slow down.
It's human
Especially
nature.
if that crash, like the car's on fire and all sorts of various explosions are happening. Like we watch.
Yeah. John Fury's banging on the car.
Dude,
Apparently he pulled his pants down.
How has no one forked over enough money to get John Fury into one of these Misfit shows? Like, I want to see him doing something like this.
It sounds like Mams was open to Jake Paul's dad versus John Fury. So we'll see.
I'd pay $80 for that fight. I'd pay $80 for that fight. I'd watch the crap out of that.
I would watch the hell out of that.
He's not a better boxer, but he's a lot more interesting than Tommy, who's just the most boring man. Like he looks like $1 million. He's decent enough in the ring, but God, he's the most boring human who's ever walked this earth.
Oh my God. I love this continued bit from you that you're like all in on this stuff, but Tommy Fury is just the worst.
He's just boring. He's just so boring.
What'd you think of the little face off of KSI? They were hitting the glass pretty hard.
It was decent. Was decent. I don't like the glass thing. I didn't like the look.
Dumb.
Dude, if you're gonna get to this point and you have Logan and Dillon, like sell it. Just sell it. Just remove that and put them in front of each other. Have extra security. In fact, just do what the UFC has done at times or boxing has done at times. We're going to have 10,000 security guards here. They're so anxious to get at each other. Nothing can stop them. So we're going to crowd the place with security guards. Just pretend that the animosity can't be contained without actually containing the animosity. Because if you contain it, then it's just boring. Like they're just standing in front of a glass panel like it's prison.
I like it. I think it worked. I watched it the whole weigh-ins, and I was like, God dang it, I'm invested.
My favorite.
Casey's in. Casey's in.
They got me. Like, ugh.
My favorite thing about it was Dillon Danis is sitting in that cage with a glass partition in the center, all by himself, and Logan Paul is taking about 9 minutes to put his socks and shoes on, and Dillon's just in this cage yelling at Logan to hurry up and get his shoes on. I was dying laughing.
Dillon was begging to do a real face-off. You can hear it on the mics. He's just like, please let us do a real face-off. Again, just winning the week. He's the showman. He knows what this is all about. I feel like he's been on point this week.
This is so crazy. All right, let's take some questions.
All right, jeez. Oh, wait, where is it? All right, because we didn't mention it, but we got to talk about it because it was hilarious.
Talk about Ariel Helwani running away. Very, very smartly, by the way. And shout out to Helwani. That dude plays hurt. He plays sick. He plays with a voice. He plays with no voice. He's had a tough time with the voice this week. Dude playing through, no days off, no minutes off, and those reflexes to get the hell out of there. Just brilliant. What did you think, Shaheen?
Yeah.
A+ for Helwani?
Electric Paul's talking about running away. I'm talking about cat-like reflexes to get yourself out of danger. Come on, man. That was tremendous. He was out of there so fast.
He set that screen up for the guy throwing the bottle.
That's it.
He set the screen up.
Ariel generated and allowed for us to get the moment of that guy launching the 90-mile-per-hour strike right at Logan. So yeah, like Ariel was just helping the cause. He wasn't running away. He was creating magic for us. So thank you to Ariel.
He's off-ball screens doing the dirty work that no one appreciates, you know.
How does the MMA media pick Logan over their own? He's not Jake. He has proved nothing to us. I'm picking a draw. I'm picking a draw. So I don't know.
Yeah, Mike. Don't count Mike. I don't feel like you have to like back the idea that like there was a time when it was Jake Paul versus MMA. I think we're like past that. I think it's kind of just this separate influencer thing. Like, I don't think that even Nate Diaz versus Jake Paul is like, he needs to win it for MMA. Nate Diaz is going in there to make money and shut up Jake Paul. Like, he's not doing it for the MMA fan in Iowa who's like, yay, I really love MMA compared to influencer boxing. He doesn't care about that. And neither do any of these guys. Dillon Danis isn't doing it for the sanctity of MMA. He's doing it to make some money. So, like, I don't think you're inclined in any capacity to root for these guys. But I do wonder if there's a tipping point where like an MMA fighter is going to do better against a guy who doesn't box that much. And that's what I'm willing to find out with this fight. I think that Jake is an exception where he's a real boxer at this point. I'm not sure Logan is. So let's see if MMA skills and fundamentals like Dillon Danis has will be enough to overcome it.
The tribalism of this is so funny to me.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting.
Did you not pick like Jake to beat Ben Askren? Did you not pick him to beat Nate Diaz? Like, you're just picking a fight. Also, one of our own. Like, Dillon has maybe one more pro fight than Casey does.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what are we talking about?
Also, one of our own that everybody spent the last 3 years absolutely
Crapping
shitting on for the entire time. Like, oh yeah, now Dillon Danis is our hero. You're like, come on, give me a break with this.
All right.
The real question is, how is Logan more of a favorite over Dillon than Fury is over KSI?
I agree. I think the lines are off. That makes sense to me, what he's asking here.
That is a good question. I don't even know what the betting line is for. I'll try to pull it up, but I don't know what it is. It was pretty high.
KSI's look decent. I will say. I mean, KSI's look decent in like the last few fights that he's had. I know he trains over there with MVP and all those guys. That's a good training room, and he looks pretty good against Joe Fournier. I know that was an illegal knockout with the elbow. Like, that was a really pretty knockout for what it was. Like, it was pretty spectacular. I don't know. He's looked pretty good.
I'm with you on that. I think Tommy Fury's gonna thump up KSI tomorrow. Like, I don't think that fight's competitive at all. I really don't.
Tommy's gonna style on him.
Yeah, because we work in the MMA world. What is a bigger fight actually between the top two fights? Because we didn't talk about this
Logan,
at all.
It's not even
Logan
close.
Danis by a mile.
Oh,
it
Logan
is not
Danis.
even. It is not even
outside
close.
of the MMA world. Just okay. I was just wondering. I don't know.
No, if you look at like the trends and the search results and just the hits, the video hits, and just everything, website hits, everything, it is different. It's miles and miles away. It is 5 times what the KSI Fury is doing. The Logan Paul.
And KSI Fury is the main event, correct?
Far and away.
It's like
They've billed it as like double main event, like Bellator tried to do with their title fights for 300. Like, they've billed it as like these are both the main event, but it will be KSI versus Tommy will be going on last.
I wonder if
Is that a mistake?
Tommy is just not.
Like
I think so. But Tommy is just not the dance partner that these guys need. And I don't even I'm not even trying to be like disrespectful to Tommy Fury. But Tommy Fury is a legit boxer. Like, Tommy Fury in this world doesn't make sense. Like, Tommy Fury is a dude who should be climbing the ranks in like British boxing and like going for titles, or I don't know if he's that level. I don't think he's that level, but going toward that. And so he's not in the theatrics. Like, his dad brings way more to the table from that capacity than he does. And so it just feels weird. Whereas Dillon Danis and Logan Paul, like, they're paired against each other and they're playing in the muck. Tommy versus Jake isn't that interesting. Tommy versus KSI isn't that interesting. But if you get KSI versus Jake, now that probably tops, right? That becomes the big fight, even though Logan is the WWE star. I think Jake versus KSI has a little bit of that secret sauce. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that fight is that big. KSI versus Tommy. It's really on the back of KSI and a little bit of John Fury sticking his butt on camera.
And his head through.
It's big glass. In the UK. It's big. It's really big in the UK.
Yeah, I just have no gauge for it because like I know KSI is this giant star, but he outside of these little events, I've never heard of the guy. So, but of course, no, this isn't for.
No,
but
he's got a very massive following, very dedicated.
Yeah, is it a mistake putting real boxers on this card?
I think so. Yeah,
because I find that kind of boring, honestly. A real boxer.
That's the point. I don't think real boxers should be in influencer boxing. And I don't say that from like a sanctimonious perspective, like get these real boxers. Like, I just don't think it's that interesting. These guys are too good skill wise to be in there with guys who have not been trained. Like, Tommy Fury comes from a lineage of the best. Like, his brother is the heavyweight champion and possibly the best heavyweight of all time. He comes from a lineage where he grew up in a gym, and he's fighting a guy who started boxing because he just got sick of playing video games and saw Jake Paul doing it. Like, it's just a mismatch. It's just not the right kind of thing. Whereas Logan Paul and Dillon Danis are comparable. Like, that makes sense. So yeah, I think real boxers shouldn't be in there.
I do think, though, like, Tommy Fury seems to be the exception, right? Like, he's the only real boxer sort of around this whole thing. Mm-hmm. And the way that he's almost talked about and viewed, he's like the final boss, right? Like, in that respect, it makes sense to me, of just like him being the final boss. He's sort of the guy, the echelon that everyone's trying to meet, because he is the actual guy. He's the real professional compared to all these guys.
He's the final boss for Jake Paul's lowest pay-per-view and getting outshined by the co-main event on the Prime card. He's the final boss for that. Tommy Fury is the final boss for not doing good business.
Yeah, Tommy Fury's not here for the business unless it's like putting butts in seats over there. But to kind of Shaheen's point, like, if you think you're so good at influencer boxing that you can somehow step up to like the pro scene, because I don't even think this KSI Tommy Fury fight is like an actual professional boxing fight, right? I think it's just kind of an exhibition that will just have a score read. So I guess if you are to be taken at any way serious in this boxing world, coming from that world, you beat Tommy Fury, at least people are like, okay, I guess we could take him a little more seriously. So I think that's what Shaheen kind of means by that. Almost a litmus test to get to the next level. Because Tommy Fury's a boxer and he's boxed boxers, but he's not good at boxing.
Well, he's not good. He's good in this world, but I agree with that sentiment. You know what you do in that case? Go chase a title, a WBA, like, go box. If you want to test yourself and you think,
why would you do that? Why would you do that?
Go box. What do you mean?
Why would you do that rather than making? Because you're making 10 times more to go fight a worse opponent. It's the Chael Sonnen thing of fight the worst guy for the best money.
That's from Tommy's perspective. I'm talking about the other perspective. If you're KSI, there's much bigger fights out there for you. He should be fighting Jake Paul and making more money. Tommy's not going to get you this payday is not dependent upon Tommy. This payday is dependent upon KSI. KSI is the one bringing the money to the equation. So for Tommy, go beat up KSI and make more money. If you're KSI, you'll make more fighting Nate Diaz. You'll make more fighting Jake Paul. You'll make more fighting any of these other guys. So it only makes sense. It only makes sense from Tommy's perspective on that front. And if you really think you're a boxer, go box.
I think Misfits Boxing is kind of amazing because I don't follow this at all, but yet the storylines are so much more in-depth and complicated than anything else on the UFC card.
Yeah.
I mean, I could talk. I could bring up a question about the UFC card. Oh, cool. But I'm not interested. I for some reason, I'm more interested in this stupid soap opera.
That's by design, though.
I know. It's I don't know. It's kind of amazing.
The UFC doesn't have to have storylines. They just expect you to tune in because they have the best roster in the world, which is 100% true. Like, there's no doubt about it. UFC has the best roster in terms of MMA on the planet. So they make you tune in every Saturday on the basis of, I know I'm getting a reliable product from the UFC. I know I'm going to get some semblance of decent fights. I know I'm going to get some semblance of stakes because they're decent fighters. And they don't try to promote it all. It's just the mill. They're just grinding until they get to the pay-per-view, and then they give a little bit of effort. But they don't have to. And nobody pushes back against it. But if you're Misfits, you have to tell a story. Otherwise, nobody's going to know who the hell these people are or why the product matters. So they have to put in this work. And to their credit, they do a decent job of it. But yeah, the UFC does not, unfortunately.
Can I real quick? Can I pivot? Because I know we only have a few minutes here before we have a hard out, and I haven't had a chance to talk about this with any of y'all over the course of the week because I was off for a couple days. So much has changed about what we're going to do with next week. Do you guys like this card more, what we have gotten now for next week, than what we would have gotten?
I don't, because I was more interested in the Paulo Costa fight. And I don't think that Kamaru Usman or Alexander Volkanovski stepping in on this short notice is from a competitive standpoint, that interesting. This reminds me of when Masvidal stepped in for Kamaru Usman the first time. And like the story of the stepping in became this thing, and it kind of took a life of its own. And that was the promotion, and that was interesting. And that really carried the fight to become interesting. And then when they got in the cage, it wasn't that interesting. I'm kind of in the same spot where I feel like the idea of them stepping in is super cool. And they were able to get a freaking champion to step in on short notice and fight Islam. And they were able to get a guy who's a former champion in Kamaru coming off a championship loss to step in, which is a really cool story and speaks to what they were able to do. But ultimately, the product I don't feel is going to be as good. I'm not as compelled by these fights because of the short notice nature.
Yeah, I don't like the short notice part. But let me ask you this. If the new card with Volkanovski and Usman, if that was the original card versus, Oliveira and Costa, which card do you think is better?
Yeah, that's more interesting to me. I still prefer the Costa matchup because he's an actual middleweight, and I want to see Khamzat versus a middleweight, but that's a lot closer. If these were the originally booked fights, I'm definitely not complaining about it. And don't get me wrong, like for what they had left, for what was available to them, they hit a home run with this.
Oh, yeah.
They have people excited, but for me, it is not like I saw a lot of talk on X on Twitter about like, is this actually better? And to your like, I think there's people who will like these fights more because I think there are people who's with those fan bases will. For me, competitively, it falls a little bit short due to the nature of the time frame. But man, they did as good as you could possibly do.
Yeah, it's to me, it's not better, but it's certainly not worse. It's different.
Yeah. That's where I'm at. Yeah,
it's different. I'm with New York Rick. I would prefer the Costa fight just because I still feel like even if Khamzat runs Kamaru Usman, and by the way, I think that fight's going to be incredibly fun because I think Usman's best chance to win is to just go balls to the wall and try to lull Khamzat into a war like Gilbert Burns did. So I don't think Usman's going to fight like a super technical fight because if Usman ends up on his back, he's going to get absolutely destroyed. He's going to get destroyed by Khamzat Chimaev. But
if Chimaev's on his back, who knows,
I mean, maybe.
That's what we're going to see. Yeah.
Yeah. We could. Or Usman just comes out and tries to knock Chimaev out, which makes this fight super fun. And I think the main event.
The thing for me.
Yeah. I think the main event is more intriguing than the Oliveira fight. I like the main event better. Co-main event, I like a little bit less. But as New York Rick said, you could have done a whole lot worse. This is as good as you can do on 11 days notice. And this whole thing about, Volk has a built-in excuse. I'm not playing that game, man. Like Volk did a media scrum and said, when I got the call, I had a smile on my face. I was relieved when I got the call because I didn't want to wait till January to fight. I was excited to do this. This wasn't like, well, I got to talk to my team. We have to iron it out. It was an immediate yes. So he himself is taking the short notice excuse out of play. This is, and for the people that are like, oh, we want the full build here. I get it, but Makhachev's already been saying, I want to go to 170. So we may not even have another chance to even book this fight if Makhachev goes up to 170. So I'm cool with it. It's going to be super interesting.
By the way, there are no excuses anyway, because if he loses twice to Islam Makhachev and Islam Makhachev is still holding that belt, it doesn't matter if he took it on 5 months notice or 10 days notice. He's not getting another crack at it. So it almost is irrelevant. He needs to be in there to compete, and there is no built-in excuse. Also, he's Alexander freaking Volkanovski. Like the dude's not coming in there to just show up. Like there's no chance. There's no world.
Yeah, and he won't even say like, well, I did my best, but it was on 11 days notice. So no he's going to go in there. If Islam beats him and say, look, he was better tonight. I lost. I said yes. So did he. And I just don't want the narrative to be if Islam goes in and wins in dominant fashion. Well, the only reason he did it is because Volk was in on 11 days notice. I just don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it.
Oh,
both guys know what they signed up for. Oh, we're certainly going to hear it.
We're going to hear it. You're going to hear it. You're going to hear it, but I think this is ultimately the best case scenario for Volk. Also, Eric, I know you got to go. So if you need to take off, go for it.
Hi, guys.
But love you, Eric. Thank you for joining us, buddy.
New York Rick, the great New York Rick.
But ultimately, to me, this feels like the best case scenario for what Volk could have asked for, right? Because I don't maybe there was some demand for this rematch, but it certainly didn't feel like there was overwhelming demand for it, at least not now, right? Like it feels like this lightweight division, this featherweight division, people wanted it to start getting moving, contenders to start getting their opportunities. And now to come in here, low stakes, a lot less pressure than the first time around. You have a built-in excuse because you will hear that excuse, Mike. Like that is going to be what you hear if he loses for the rest of time as well. He didn't get a full camp, and he would have done better if he got a full camp. To me, this is like the best possible scenario if you're Alexander Volkanovski and you've been begging for this opportunity. Like this is it. And then for the co-main, like I understand it is inherent to make the Masvidal comparison because it involves Kamaru Usman and it's something we just saw relatively recently. But man, I don't know that comparison fits for me because Kamaru Usman's just a demonstrably better fighter than Jorge Masvidal. Like Kamaru Usman a year ago, we were talking about as like this unbeatable guy who just would never be beaten. And now, sure, he lost twice to Leon Edwards, but Leon Edwards is also really good. Like Kamaru Usman is not anybody's chump. He's not going to go in there and lose in the way that Kevin Holland lost to Khamzat Chimaev. Like I loved the Paulo Costa fight. I don't know that I like this fight as much, but if the Costa fight was a 10, this is like a 9.5 for me. Like to see Usman in this spot after we have seen Usman for so long in such a different way, right? Like as the champ, the guy who's going to get the time, the guy who's going to be able to, like everyone's working to him, to see him come in as this underdog last second figure moving up in weight, like that is such a different look for Kamaru Usman. And we really like didn't know what Kamaru Usman was going to be doing, right? Like we were talking about him versus Wonder Boy, him something like that, maybe like going back to the back
Bilal.
of the queue at 170. Yeah, like this is an infinitely better opportunity for him because all of a sudden you beat Khamzat Chimaev, dude. You're fighting for the middleweight belt next. Like that's what's happening.
It is an incredible opportunity for Usman. I think incredible opportunity for Usman. Yeah, absolutely. I just the short notice thing. I just don't like it. I'm just getting like these old feels of Khabib versus Max Holloway. You know, bring him in late notice, and just things just don't work out right in this weird sport, especially the international travel they have to do. Just cutting that weight. So I don't know. I'm hoping everything's awesome, but
yeah,
it's MMA.
Well, what I also like about the Usman thing is no one saw it coming. No one saw this coming. Because I told the story on Heck of a Morning. We were told about a month ago that this fight with Costa might not happen. That they were making phone calls to a lot of different fighters about possibly stepping in and taking the fight. And it seemed like, all right, well, the UFC ultimately landed on, all right, we'll see how Paulo does over the next few weeks. Maybe he can fight. Let's try to keep it on. But this fight was in jeopardy for a while. I didn't really know why when I was trying to seek out information about this. And then obviously Paulo earlier this week posting the elbow, which is just friggin' nasty.
Yeah,
and I'm like, there's no way this guy's fighting. There's just no way. And, with Ikram on the card, Cannonier has a fight booked, like all these other guys that maybe could have stepped in. Maybe they pulled Michel Pereira from this card and they put him in there with Khamzat Chimaev. Like there's a lot of ways we could have gone at 185, but for Usman to be the guy, I was like, damn, this is pretty cool because he's not even name you thought of in this whole conversation, which is wild. So kudos to Usman. And this is a great chance for him. If he's even competitive with Chimaev, even in a loss, and Colby wins the welterweight title, like Colby could just call him out and get a welterweight title shot. Like this is, I'm sorry, but
no,
these are the types of situations that put you in good favor with the UFC.
This is why this sport is so outrageous and so awesome to follow sometimes, because there is now a very real path. There's a very real world to where suddenly, very quickly, very soon, we will be talking about the potential of a Sean Strickland, Kamaru Usman rematch for the title at 185 pounds. A fight that literally zero of us would have thought about even 2 weeks ago or a month ago before the Strickland thing happened. Like the way that things change and the pathways that open just randomly out of nowhere, there is nothing else like it. There really isn't. Like there's no other sport where that functions in this way, just systematically, like functionally. It's crazy. I love it so much.
It's just so crazy too. Like we're like, okay, Chimaev's going to middleweight. We know he's unbelievably dangerous at welterweight, but the jury's still out at middleweight. And yet when he goes to middleweight, he's fighting a welterweight again. So we kind of don't know still, like how, even if Chimaev looks amazing, in the end of the day, he still fought a welterweight. So we'll see. I don't know. It's mixed martial arts is wild.
I can't wait for the watch party. I
So
cannot
excited.
freaking wait, man. I cannot wait. All right, are we good? I think
good.
we've done it all. We'll be back. If you guys got more questions, I understand, but don't you worry. Casey and I will be back 1:30 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, and we'll answer all of your questions about
And it's
normal
we're-
UFC card,
but
chaotic.
we're
Manchester
starting
card.
for the Misfits card. We're not starting before the
Oh yeah,
yeah.
it's before
yeah,
the Misfits card.
It's for the Misfits card, not the UFC
the
card.
Prime card.
The
Yeah,
Prime
no.
card. Yeah.
Look, we all know where the attention of the combat sports world is going to be. Whether you like it or not, you could say, stop talking about it. You're going to be paying attention. Sorry. We all are in a weird way. It's the canker sore events.
Hey, man.
In
If
combat
you don't like
sports in
it,
2023.
if you don't like it, here's what you do, fans. If you don't like this kind of content, engage more with the Apex card content. Because if people see more engagement on the UFC content and less on this type of stuff, then they'll do that type of content. That's just not the reality.
The power is yours, my friends. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow. For Casey, for Shaheen, I am Mike Heck. Good night, everybody.
Love you guys. Go D-backs.
Let's go.
Go Stros!